Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From The Net. Topic of this It Came From The Network, WCW Monday Nitro, marked Season 2, Episode 20 on Peacock from May 27th, 1996. And the reason we're doing this, there is a seismic change moment in pro wrestling that happens on the show, and you may know it just from looking at the thumbnail before clicking on this video. So I kind of wanted to go back and watch this entire show, see what the show around that moment was, see how it holds up, see what they were doing before that shift was made. So I went back and watched this. With that being said, if you haven't seen my videos before, thank you first of all for clicking on this. Secondly, I do rate everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. Let's jump right in. We start the review with seeing Ric Flair and Arn Anderson going up against the American Males, Scotty Riggs and Marcus Alexander Bagwell, aka Buff. Flair has with him Miss Elizabeth and Woman. This was in the era where Elizabeth was giving Flair all of Randy Savage's money because she wanted him to divorce or whatever they're going with. I will say one thing about the American Males, which I thought were a really good tag team. You're never going to forget their theme song if you heard it, especially if you watched WCW back then and heard it week after week. It's like an earworm, and it's really great. I mean, it's so simplistic. Jimmy Hart hit a home run here, and basically all it is 2 words: American Males, American Males. It's catchy, it's annoying, and it just works. It kind of has one of those things like Cotton Eye Joe or I'm a Barbie Girl that just sticks in your brain once you hear it just one time. This was a good match. I kind of felt a little bit like Flair and Arn were walking through the motions here. Flair and Arn Anderson do pick up the win here. I'm giving this a 3. Afterwards, Flair and Arn and Liz and Woman go to the VIP area, which, if you don't remember, Ric Flair at this time had a little area in the aisleway set up where they had basically a charcuterie board and some champagne for after their matches. That was pretty cool. Arn was the one that stuck out the most here on the promo. They're talking about a future tag match between them and Mongo McMichael and Kevin Greene, who was a standout linebacker for both the Carolina Panthers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I believe this was the year he left the Steelers to go to the Panthers in free agency. I think it matches up properly. I might be wrong on that, but a great football player. I believe he's in the Hall of Fame. If he's not, he probably should be. Then that's followed up with a workout segment with McMichael and Kevin Greene. And the weird thing about this is the videos seem to have like a shaky, distorted feel to it. Their voices were out of sync with when they were talking. It was really weird. I feel like maybe something in editing, maybe something that WWE had to do to take out some background noise or something really did this, because I don't remember it being this way. I don't remember it being this low quality, almost stop animation feel to it. It was a weird little thing, but something I definitely noticed. And if you do watch this, definitely look for that, because it seems a little weird. And I don't think it was an aesthetic choice at the time. That's followed up with the match we're all looking for. We get Steve Dahl, and he's going up against a new wrestler being managed by Colonel Robert Parker, one that we're all excited to see. The guy that's going to change the face of WCW, the Mauler, aka Mike Enos, aka one of the Beverly Brothers. I forget if he's Bo or Blake, I don't remember. I do like the Beverly Brothers. I liked them better when they were Mike Enos and Wayne Bloom in AWA, but they were good as the Beverly Brothers too. So we get to see the Mauler and Steve Dahl. Obviously, they're building their future on the Mauler, and since you know wrestling history, you know that the Mauler went on to become a really huge star. Who am I bullshitting? After the commercial, we get to see the reason why I picked this video. We start seeing Razor Ramon at the time coming through the crowd, and it was kind of interesting, especially if you watched it then, because it was a shock to the system. For those of you that are too young that didn't live through this era, we had a very basic version of the internet. There wasn't what you would say like smart fans like we have now, people that watch videos like this or watch Fightful Select or Cultaholic or any of that. So for the most part, 95% of wrestling fans had no clue that Scott Hall, aka Razor Ramon, that his contract was up with WWE. So they had no clue he was coming here. So it made it feel real. Now, looking at it here, there are some things that I'm going to point out that should have made it very obvious. Seeing him walk through the crowd, yeah, maybe that could have been played off as real. We did see something similar a number of years back when Shane Douglas tried to promote one of the promotions he was with in a WWE Raw crowd and took off his shirt to promote it, but they quickly shot away from it, so I think that's what they would have done here. The other thing is he jumps a guardrail. There's no security. The camera starts following him. And the biggest giveaway that this doesn't work, he's allowed to speak. He gets in the ring, starts cutting a promo, and Steve Dahl and the Mauler just kind of fuck off and go away and disappear into Poochie's homeworld. For all I know, who knows where they went. If you know anything about the show, you've seen this moment. It's been on every NWO retrospective. It's been on every Scott Hall retrospective. It's been on every Attitude Era Monday Night War retrospective. This is a seismic change in the wrestling business. This was the nucleus and the beginning of the NWO. This was Razor Ramon defecting and starting a war with WCW while somewhat hinting that he was part of the WWE. And I say somewhat in quotations because it's heavily hinted. This was an amazing moment for what this was. The match, not so much. The match I'd probably give a 1. For this moment and what it means to pro wrestling, the ripple effects that are still being felt today, I'm giving this a 5. That's followed up with the Sergeant Craig Pitbull Pittman with his manager Teddy Long going up against Diamond Dallas Page. And you may say to yourself, following up Scott Hall with Diamond Dallas Page sounds like a great idea. We got to remember that this was before DDP really took off into the stratosphere. He was still somewhat of a goofy heel here. He hadn't quite found his way into the character and made it what it would become much later on. This is an okay match. Kind of felt similar to the first match where it just felt like two guys going through the motions here. DDP picks up the win with the Diamond Cutter. I'm giving this one a 3. After that, we get a video package of Macho Man Randy Savage basically being unhinged and explaining why he was banned from showing up in WCW, which is something that Scott Hall famously mentioned in his promo, that the Nacho Man can't get into the building, but he goes where he wants. This is a great little video package. I really enjoyed it. After that, we get a promo in the back with the Shark and Mean Gene. The Shark is Earthquake John Tenta. Basically, he's talking about how Kevin Sullivan has kicked him out of the Dungeon of Doom, and to make up for it, he's going to take the World Championship off the Giant, aka the Big Show, later on tonight. I thought this was a really good promo. Did it feel like an 80s promo? It definitely did. He was definitely screaming at you, but I did find it enjoyable. And Earthquake, aka the Shark, is someone that I really enjoyed. I think he's a great wrestler. He kind of doesn't get the love and respect that he deserves, but I thought he was awesome, and this was really fun. I enjoyed this promo. Next, we're treated to a Hulk Hogan ego boost fluff piece, basically showing Hogan with a lot of the biggest stars of the time. I guess for the people that tuned in when Scott Hall showed up or changed the channel because their friends told them that Scott Hall showed up, that you needed to reiterate how big of a star Hulk Hogan was. It shows him sparring with George Foreman, Shaq singing his praises with him and Shaq hanging out, him and Dennis Rodman from the last year's Bash at the Beach, which I just covered as part of the Baywatch show named Bash at the Beach, the aforementioned Kevin Greene hanging out with him and Macho Man, and finally Sugar Ray Leonard talking about Hulk Hogan at a charity event. To me, this felt like what it was, a way to boost Hulk Hogan's ego. After that, we get the aforementioned match, the Shark going up against the Giant for the WCW Championship. The Giant has with him Jimmy Hart. He was still part of the Dungeon of Doom at this point. In this match, it wasn't great. It was sloppy, it was slow, and there's matches from the Giant that I liked during this time. There's definitely matches from the Shark. I just mentioned how much I enjoy him. This just didn't feel, I don't know, something didn't click between the two. The in-ring quality of the matches up to this point is a little bit subpar, and I was a little bit shocked because, to me, even during this time, 96, 95, I felt like WCW had a really good in-ring product. And going back and watching this, it didn't feel as great here. Ultimately, the Giant picks up a win with a very impressive chokeslam. Afterwards, we get Big Bubba Rogers, aka the Big Boss Man, coming out, who starts to cut off the Shark's hair and then shaves half his head, which was a look that the Shark went with for a little while. This just wasn't good. I'm going to give this a 2. I didn't find it entertaining. That's followed up with a match for the WCW television title, which Think about that, the television title's after the world title. We get Max, another member of the Dungeon of Doom, going up against Lex Luger. And if you don't remember Max, he kind of was your generic muscle-bound guy. They probably could have made something out of him, I don't know. But he had very little charisma. On the other hand, Luger had a ton of charisma. This is a rather quick match. Luger picks up the win here with the torture rack. Afterwards, he gets interviewed with Mean Gene, basically talking about him and Sting. This was during the time where Luger was a heel and Sting was a face, but they were a tag team together because they were still best friends, which I always thought was a good storyline, a good story to go with. I'm giving this segment a 3. Again, the quality of the match just isn't that great. Next up, we have one of the power plant graduates, Hard Work Bobby Walker, going up against Brad Armstrong in what they're calling as a cruiserweight contender match. I don't make this stuff up, guys. Even at this time, I think there were 10 other wrestlers that would have been better cruiserweights. And this isn't to say that someone like Brad Armstrong, who was a really good talent, he probably should have been in the mix with the cruiserweights. Bobby Walker had a look to him, and he had a certain natural charisma. I don't think he ever really got it in the ring, and part of that, I think, is the way he was brought into it. Coming out of the power plant, I think he was brought on the TV too quickly. He would have been better served if they would have done something like loaned him out to Memphis or something of that nature, one of the smaller promotions that was still going during the time. Maybe even let New Japan throw him through the dojo for a year. Because most of the hard work Bobby Walker matches that I've seen, you could see he's a little bit clumsy. He's got the athletic talent, he just doesn't have it all there. Walker does pick up the win here. Again, I thought this was not a great match. There was a lot of miscommunication, a couple botches, giving this one a 2. Next up, we have what has to be my favorite match of the show, Lord Steven Regal, which I'm probably going to call him William during this, so forgive me if I do. Going up against Das Wunderkind, Alex Wright. I really like this match, and Alex Wright's another wrestler that I think really could have been something bigger if he was pushed properly. I really think he had something. He had a good look to him. He had a good ability. He may have lacked on the promos, but you could get around that, especially if you would have partnered him with someone that could have made him something better. This was a really fun match. One of the cool things about the match, they go to a break, and coming back from a break, we get to see one of the Blood Run Cold Glacier preview segments, which, think about the dichotomy of that. We got the NWO, which is supposed to be a realistic invasion angle, just starting to happen at the same time where we're bringing in Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. And no knock on Glacier. I always thought Glacier was a fun gimmick. I always liked using him in the old WCW Nintendo 64 games for the cryonic kick. I thought it was a cool looking move there. And it would end matches in a knockout. For some reason, I got good at the games and I didn't like to beat anybody by a pin or a submission. I liked to knock him out. So Glacier was a good wrestler to use. Kevin Nash, because he could knock you out with the power bomb, or he had a clothesline and a big boot that would also knock you out. Like if you hit the big boot like 3 or 4 times, you would knock the wrestler out. Anyway, I digress. Great games. Some of the greatest wrestling games of all time. Back to the match. Regal and Alex Wright just put on a great show. Very European based, which makes sense. I mean, William Regal, Steven Regal is from that era. Alex Wright is, I think he was a 3rd generation wrestler who has that lineage and was trained in that way. This was really fun. Regal picks up the win here. Afterwards, we see an interview with him and Mean Gene Okerlund in the ring, much like we seen earlier with Luger. This time, Regal is calling out Sting. And that's a match I didn't remember happening. I don't remember ever seeing a Steven Regal versus Sting match. I'd have to go back and see if I could find one. I'm sure it did, and you're probably screaming at your screen now going, they wrestled at Starrcade or Halloween Havoc or whatever. But it's just skipping my mind right now. This segment I thought was all really good. I'm giving it a 4. Then we get to our main event of the show. We get Sting going up against Scott Steiner in what is said to be 2 really good friends. I was really starting to like this match. I really enjoyed the beginning of it, and then it started falling apart. You had first Lex Luger come out to ringside, followed by Rick Steiner, and then there was a couple little sloppinesses that happened to start basically the finish of the match, where all 4 men start brawling with each other. basically making it a no contest. I feel like this would have been better served to be a time limit draw than what happened here. Although it does push forward the fact that Sting and Luger and the Steiners are feuding at the time. The non-finish kind of brings back the bad memories of WCW at their worst. I'm giving this one a 3. Then we go into the final segment, which is another thing that was a dead giveaway, that the Scott Hall appearance was a work and not a shoot. During the second hour, where Eric Bischoff and Bobby Heenan are the commentary, Bischoff made several comments about letting him come and talk, that he's going to talk to him when Bischoff's ready. So at the end of the show, we get another famous promo, which I'm sure you've probably seen again. It's on all the videos, all the highlights. We get Scott Hall coming out and basically throwing out the challenge that we see get answered at Bash at the Beach, to get Billionaire Ted to get his 3 best men, because we're coming and we're going to fight this out in the ring. Again, another great promo. Scott Hall really stood out here, and I know it's been said a million times by a million talking heads how much different the NWO was than anything going on at this time and how revolutionary they were. Seeing it, and again, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to go here, really seeing it again, watching it, it was kind of like watching MTV one day and you're watching Poison and Cinderella and Warrant, and then the next day you turn on MTV and here Smells Like Teen Spirit. And overnight, the whole music industry changed. The NWO changed the whole wrestling industry, and this was the very beginning of it. Yes, there was ECW bubbling up at this time, and they were making their contributions to changing the wrestling industry, but here we're talking about a company that 5-6 million people a week were watching during what is most people's opinion the hottest point in wrestling history, where you had 5 or 6 million watching WCW, another 5 million watching WWE, and some that would switch back and forth between the two. Just a great moment and a great spot to go back and revisit. Overall, though, I would have to say this show is a little bit disappointing with everything around it. Is the groundwork of some really good stuff there, like DDP's here, Scott Hall shows up, Sting and Scott Steiner's match could lead to some great stuff down the road, which it did. Yet for all that, there was a lot of misses, like Max and the story with the shark. Just not great. Hard work Bobby Walker. Sorry, but just not a great match. I'd have to give this show overall a 3. I definitely recommend checking it out just for the historic precedence and seeing for yourself how much of a game changer Scott Hall really was. But other than that, if this was any other Monday Nitro, I would call it very skippable. With that being said, if you made it to the end here, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. If you see where it says join, that's how you become a channel member. Becoming a channel member gets you shout outs, gets you a special emoji, what's up to Chris, gets you preferential treatment on ideas for future videos. You get some videos released early to you, so it definitely has benefits. And it also helps me out, which is a big benefit for me. With that being said, if you made it to the end here, let me know you made it to the end. Put me at NWO for life down here in the comments. My name is George Coles, and you've been watching another It Came From The Network.